Welcome to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. President Donald Trump was reelected last year after campaigning on a promise to carry out the largest deportation effort in American history. Immigration has once again become a flashpoint in the first year of his second term, and admittedly, we haven't devoted nearly enough attention to it on this show, but that changes now. Over the next 2 episodes, we'll bring you the in-depth coverage this complex and deeply personal issue deserves. This week, we'll hear from a reporter who went on an ICE ride-along, witnessing several arrests firsthand earlier this year. We'll also dig into the numbers with 2 journalists who sifted through tens of thousands of records to answer a pressing question: just how many people are being arrested by ICE in Nevada? And critically, are these mostly violent criminals, or are people whose only violation may be crossing the border illegally being swept up as well? Next week, we'll broaden the lens. You'll hear from an immigration advocate fighting in the courts to block mass deportations, and from someone who fully supports the administration's approach, including the ambitious target of up to 3,000 immigration arrests per day. Nevada, with its large immigrant workforce and tight-knit communities, is a revealing case study of what Trump's second-term deportation policies look like on the ground. So we'll start this episode with my colleague Kim Burrows, who joined ICE agents on their operation in May as they arrested a few dozen people over the course of a few days. Then later, we'll break down the arrest numbers with the Nevada Independent's Eric Neugeboren and Isabella Aldrete. You know her, you love her if you watch News 4, Fox 11, sometimes NSN too. Kim Burrows, our investigative reporter. Thank you so much for being here, Kim.
Hi, Ben.
I think you've been on a couple times after election.
Yeah, I love it.
So, many-time Ballot Battleground Nevada guest here. Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
It's going to be an interesting conversation because you got to do something that no one else in Northern Nevada media has really been able to do, right?
Correct.
How did this come about, this ICE ride-along that you got to do back in May? How did it happen?
They actually reached out to me, as odd as that is. They knew I had been asking to do a ride-along. I had worked and done a lot of stories with the FBI. So through my FBI connections that I have, the ICE folks reached out to the FBI saying, hey, who do you recommend in Northern Nevada? They wanted to tout and they wanted to show off what they were doing because they were getting a lot of backlash about the tactics they used, how they were arresting people, if they were using warrants. And so I think they wanted some transparency in this, and they knew I had been asking for the ride-along and the information, and we here at News 4 and Fox 11 have been asking for months and months and months. It's just ongoing about how this is all working in these arrests that they've been making.
Yeah, obviously huge stories, but difficult to access and actually see in action until this ride-along back in May. What did you know going into it? I mean, did you know maybe how many people they were going to try and arrest or where you were going, or was it all kind of top secret until the morning of?
Very much top secret until the morning of. They said, we'll meet you at 5 a.m. We'll meet you in a Carson City location. When you pull up, it needs to not be a big fanfare. They were worried about obviously tipping off the community, and maybe somebody in the community might let others know these illegal immigrants that I said were living down in the Carson City and Fallon and Fernley and the Reno area. So they wanted this completely top secret until they were ready to tip their hand and go either door knocking and look for these people.
Yeah. So you get there, it's dusk in the first
We couldn't even see. It was dark.
You couldn't hardly see anything. They're kind of game planning on the side of the street. Just walk me through kind of what kind of happens throughout the morning, especially with this first arrest that you guys talked a lot about in your report.
So they had a media spokesperson come with us. He was sent in from the Salt Lake City office. So he kind of gave us some guidance about what we could shoot, what we couldn't. They were completely open about it. They just didn't want faces on camera. They said they had some concerns, except for the person we were going to interview, about safety of their agents, of the officers that were there. This was in collaboration with the FBI, the Marshal Service. There were several other law enforcement agencies as well there. And they were concerned because they say that they had death threats. Families have been threatened, wives, children. It's really extended past the point point of them doing their jobs, they say, and it went into the family. So they were very concerned about showing their face. So that was the only agreement that we had, is please don't show their face except for the gentleman you're going to interview, which was the supervisor. They met. There was a group of about 15 or so, 12, 15 maybe agents that were there. They discussed among themselves and didn't handhold us at all. They kind of let us do whatever we wanted for shooting the video. And they discussed, all right, who's going after this person? Who's going after this person? And there was a list of people who have had prior convictions and have previously been told you were in this country illegally, but they had criminal convictions, not just allegations. They were actually convicted of certain crimes. And during the time period of several days, including our ride-along, they had 52 illegal immigrants that were arrested and deported out of the Reno, northern Nevada area. So we just showed one or two of them. We did some door knocking. So after they met, they discussed who they would be door knocking and going after and trying to arrest. We went along with an officer. We went along with the media spokesperson from Salt Lake City, my photographer, and me. We went down to Carson City. We sat on a house that had been surveyed, and there was surveillance on this house, and they knew that this person left for work at approximately a certain time. So we waited for that time. The time passed. A half hour later, the person comes out of the house, and we instantly get on the radio, and he's got 2 kids with him. That has a whole nother level of concern, because obviously you want the kids safe. You want this to be a safe arrest. Any contact, we didn't know. We believed that this person may have been a gang member, so we didn't know if he was going to make a quick phone call, seeing that there might have been officers around. We were all undercover. We were all in the neighborhood. We had several cars fanned out in the neighborhood, and as soon as this man got into his car with the kids, taking them to school, we later found out, headed up Highway 50 to the Lake Tahoe area where the kids just happened to go to school up there. I don't really know why. We did a traffic stop. We pulled this person over. It was completely calm. They had the man step out of the car. They then told him behind the car why he was being detained and then later arrested, and not doing it in front of the kids. They said they were worried about, upsetting them too much.
Yeah, 17 and 18-year-old, right?
Correct.
And could you, was there a scene? Could you tell if they were, distraught as this was happening? Or
They seemed... I don't know if they understood it, but they seemed to be okay. The family was immediately called. The wife was called, and I believe there was a sister or another family member that was also called, saying, please come pick up the car. Please come and get the kids. They were, again, old enough that they could have driven, but they instead chose to call the family. Waited until the family got there. They hugged him. They kissed him. It was kind of a sad goodbye, knowing that he was likely getting deported. I mean, we didn't know the process at the time and how long he'd be there and if the family could see him, but we knew that he was likely going to be out of the country here, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and you did confirm that he was ultimately deported
He
back
was.
to Mexico?
The ICE officials told us the people that they were taking in on that sweep that day would be out of the country likely within 48 hours. They were within 24 hours at that Reno facility just for the holding and the processing. They were all being put on one big plane, and they told me within 24 to 48 hours they would be back to their home country. It was a quick move. And again, these are people that didn't need to go through the court process because they have already been determined after appeal and appeal and appeal. In some cases, the guy we arrested had appealed, I think it was 2 or 3 times, that should not have been in this country. He committed a crime and he was convicted of that. So there was no appeal process even pending.
Yeah, it was involuntary manslaughter back in 2014, right?
You got your notes in front of you. Very good, Ben.
I just want to confirm that. And then, the deportation order several years after that, but
correct.
Multiple years prior to when obviously this happened now in 2025. All of the people that ICE arrested on that day had criminal convictions, correct?
Correct. Every single one of them. And that was, I think, their initial target, if you will, in northern Nevada here is, they got a lot of flack for they're going in without warrants, they're grabbing people out of Home Depots, and that may have been happening in other parts of the country. Here in northern Nevada, they were just picking up and arresting people who had criminal convictions and were already deemed to be in this country illegally and not allowed to stay.
Yeah. We should point out, you're going to hear later in this episode data that kind of shows as the summer went on. Again, this was, I believe, in early May. A lot of these enforcement actions expanded to people that didn't have a criminal conviction. But at least on this day, it was, I think a couple of dozen arrests across northern Nevada on the Monday and Tuesday of that week.
We've got some convictions here on child molestation, DUI, convicted of battery, carrying a concealed weapon was another person, a person from Carson City, the statutory sexual seduction, which is also known as statutory rape. And we also had another person from Carson City with involuntary manslaughter, and that was the person we picked up, arrested, and deported. Not we as in me, but with the ICE agents.
Yeah, you were in the car.
But I was just really surprised, Ben, at just how open they were. They answered every single one of my questions. ICE did when I was asking them even during the interview, but while I was kind of just processing it, just because there was a lot going on about, why did you guys do this and how come this? And I need more information on the exact date and charges, and I need to know specifics. They would make a phone call to their Denver office, to their Salt Lake City office, and give me every single answer that I wanted. Not one question I was told, we can't answer that. I don't have that information. They found out everything for me. So I was impressed by how open it was. It was also, they were aware that this was hard on families, that they were arresting people that were being deported and likely may never see or anytime soon see their loved ones. It was emotional, and they were aware, and I felt they were sensitive about it instead of just grabbing people, throwing them in a car, and off we go to the next one, that they let these loved ones come in and say goodbye, and they gave them as much time as they needed before they took them down to the processing center.
Interesting. Yeah. ICE has gotten obviously a lot of flack and criticism for, we've seen the videos of agents wearing masks and sometimes not wearing kind of the labeled vests and stuff. What was there? I saw a couple people that were masked and unmasked, and just tell me kind of what they were wearing and kind of how they went about this.
They were all identified. Everybody had either ICE on their vest or law enforcement or police. I guess it said police. So they were all identified as law enforcement people. They were all they all had vests on. I think they all had guns on. We had vests on as we went along because we didn't know how this was going to go. We were very nervous when we first started going in as the media, thinking this could go sideways. If they're gang members and they call in their buddies that, they don't want to be taken into custody, we just didn't know how far and how dangerous this could get. We felt very safe. We stood behind cars when they went to make the arrest, but everybody was uncovered until they went, the ICE agents and the marshals and everybody else, the FBI, they were all uncovered in their conversations with each other, and they knew the camera was there, but we had an agreement off the top that we wouldn't show faces to protect them. But when they went into the houses, they said that there were security cameras around a lot of the houses. We went to one residence on the outskirts of Carson City that they said they flagged the cameras and noted the cameras, and so they put masks on, they said, because they would be picked up on the security video, and that's where they were afraid that maybe their families could be threatened, they could be threatened. Their identities have been released online, and they were just concerned for their safety and their families.
Interesting. Any other big takeaways or impressions? I mean, again, just to restate this, we had this opportunity, first news crew, and I think still only news crew to be able to do something like this. So a really interesting opportunity for our news audience to show people what was happening. Again, this is one day, this is only one enforcement operation, but to take people kind of behind the scenes is something that we haven't been able to see at all. And
I think you hit on it, that things have changed maybe in other parts of the country as they go along, where they do these sweeps at businesses and whatnot. But I was surprised by how much time they had spent doing the surveillance on one person to find out exactly how they moved so that they could make this arrest safely. They didn't need a warrant because these people are leaving their houses. They're now in public areas, and they can go in for the traffic arrest, if you will, traffic pullover, and then they arrest them from there. And I asked the ICE agents, I said, if this guy doesn't leave his house, I said, how quickly could you get a warrant? Is it a problem? Is that why you're not getting warrants? They said, no, we can get a warrant within a half hour. A judge would sign it immediately. We're just trying to do this the safest way we can. If it's in the house, I imagine that you've got extra circumstances. Are there weapons in the house? Would the family members get involved? And that's probably not the safest thing to go busting into a house anyway, right? Yeah. They want to make this calmly and peacefully. I have reached out to the ICE agent that I've dealt with, the media spokesperson I deal with in Salt Lake City. He's been very open. I followed up on arrests that they now post on Twitter coming out of the Salt Lake City office about further arrests that have been made here in the Reno, Northern Nevada area. He's been completely open and honest with, why they arrested, the details of it, so I can continue to have contact with that person, follow up. And I'm ready, and I've reached out to do another ride-along to find out how things have changed since this initial push. And if you look at ICE on social media, they're pretty out there, and the stuff they say is at times can be determined as being offensive, aggressive. They're just very, we got another one. Like, it's just very out there. And I'm just kind of surprised. I guess that's maybe the president's tone and the directive from that, from the top down. But I'm just surprised at how open and, I don't mean aggressive, maybe. It's very in your face about we're arresting these people. Yeah. They want people to self-deport. Yeah. They're putting that message out there too. Please don't let us use our resources, self-deport. Don't let us come for you. Handle it yourself. So I want to see how things have changed here in Northern Nevada. Are we running out of arrests? Do we have everybody on the list they want? I just have a lot of questions. So we're planning on following up, and maybe we'll do another ride-along.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be looking forward to that for sure, because you have done a great job continuing to follow this story. It's obviously been such an important story over the last 6-9 months.
Long time,
certainly under this new administration. Kim Burrows, thank you so much for coming on Battleground Nevada. Thank you for the hard work and all the reporting out in the field. Keep it up. We'll have you back next time.
Oh, good. We'll see if we can get another ride along. We'll follow up with it.
Thanks, you.
Ben.
Next up, I sat down with Eric Neugeboren and Isabella Aldrete, two reporters from the Nevada Independent, the wonderful nonprofit news site. They got a hold of tons of ICE arrest records from the Deportation Data Project out of UC Berkeley. And earlier this summer, they published the most in-depth look at ICE arrests in Nevada to date. Not only how many people have been arrested, but the breakdown. How many of these undocumented immigrants actually have a violent criminal past? Their insights were fascinating, so let's get right to our conversation with Eric and Bella.
And the youngest guest in Battleground Nevada history joining me now. I think so. I have to confirm that, but no. Happy to be joined by Eric Neugeboren and Isabella Aldrete, two young reporters at the Nevada Independent. Eric and Bella, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We have had many hours spent in the NV Ledge press room, so it's nice to hang out in a different venue. But speaking of venues, Eric just got back from one of the most iconic venues in all of sports at the U.S. Open. How was that?
It was incredible.
Yeah. And now
I'm really rubbing it in to Ben, who
I know I've never been, not a big tennis fan by any stretch, but that's so cool. What was the highlight of that trip?
The highlight of that trip was probably I was watching Ben Shelton, who is a young American, top 10 in the world. It was a really good match until he unfortunately had to withdraw because of an injury. But the highlight was I did get the point of the match on video.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll play that in the podcast here. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, as much as we'd love to talk about our summer travels, let's dive into the main reason that we have you guys here today, which is you guys published on the NevadaIndependent.com a great story a couple months back, diving deep into all the data in terms of ICE, not deportations. We'll get into the distinction there in a moment, but ICE arrests in Nevada, tracking back to the last year, but also through the first half of this year, of course, under the Trump administration. Before we get into kind of the nitty gritty in terms of how you guys got this data and where it comes from and whatnot, we'll start with the general question here. What did you guys find looking through all this data?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we found was probably unsurprisingly an immense surge in arrests in Nevada by ICE since the Trump administration began, and then even an increase over the course of the Trump administration. So the things that we were looking for is really trying to, because we've all heard the stories of ICE arrests and deportations, and we really wanted to look at the data behind it. What do the arrest numbers look like in Nevada, especially compared with the Biden administration?
How many maybe arrests per day were we averaging prior in 2024 under the Biden administration, and then in the first half of 2025?
Yeah, we've seen a drastic escalation. Before Trump stepped into office the second time, we are seeing about 50 arrests monthly in Nevada, and that's drastically increased. Now we're seeing something around 200 arrests monthly since Trump stepped back into office, and those numbers have seemed to only increase since when we crunched this data last.
Yeah, because there was the call from White House advisor Stephen Miller, who was, I think, wanting 3,000 arrests per day across the country. I forget exactly when that was, but you guys noticed that the ICE arrests really started to tick up kind of around that time, right?
Yeah, so that was about in late May when Stephen Miller, who is President Trump's top immigration advisor, demanded an increase in the number of daily ICE arrests. And we kind of looked at what the number of arrests looked like before that declaration or order and after. And just for the audience's awareness, this data goes through the end of July. So there was about a 2-month period between that order and when this data goes through. And across those 2 months, there were nearly 700 ICE arrests in Nevada. But in roughly the same period at the start of the Trump administration, there was only about 330 arrests. So nearly double or more than double the number of arrests since that order compared with the start of the administration.
Yeah, I think it's also notable that since we wrote the story, the quote-unquote big, beautiful bill passed, and that also funneled in a lot more funds for ICE and immigration enforcement. So it's likely that those numbers have increased. And
yeah, we've seen a big, hiring push from ICE and from CBP and whatnot, and so that probably is going to help them as they try and reach Stephen Miller's goal of 3,000 arrests per day.
Which they are not.
Right, yeah. How close are they to that?
Not close,
okay.
Yeah. So the data, and we'll talk about how we got it and what it shows, but we were looking at the Nevada-specific data, but the data also exists for the entire country, and they are there. I think it's definitely not more than 2,000, so not close, and it seems like he has his work cut out for him if he wants to hit that.
Absolutely. When it comes to people with a criminal conviction or in the criminal system in some fashion, or no criminal conviction whatsoever, a lot of the messaging, I think, during the presidential campaign was we're going after the gang members and the violent criminals and the murderers and whatnot. Does the data back that up, that most of these people that are being arrested by ICE, at least in Nevada, the numbers that you guys looked at, have been in the criminal justice system in some fashion?
So I would say yes and no. I guess I'll start with saying that the data that we've gotten kind of separates these people arrested into 3 categories. They've either been convicted of criminal charges, they're either pending criminal charges, or they have a third designation that essentially means no criminal record, and they may have immigration violations, but no, they're not really enmeshed into the criminal justice system. And we saw that 15% of people who had been arrested in Nevada under Trump had no criminal record, which was about double the rate under Biden. Looking a little bit closer into the number of people arrested with a criminal record, that was about 75% under Biden, and that was only 44% under Trump. So doing the math, it's a lot of these people are pending criminal charges. But as we talked about in our reporting, it's not like they are necessarily pending or have faced criminal convictions of the most violent or serious crimes. A lot of them are for traffic offenses, for DUI. But I think that we found more than 70% of the people who, in the ICE data, we were able to see their criminal conviction histories, did not have a violent or sexual crime associated with them.
Gotcha. So the violent offenders are the minority here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note just how murky the label, I guess, criminal offense can be. A legal entry into the U.S. is a crime, so somebody crossed the border illegally, that could constitute them having a criminal past, but that doesn't necessarily mean they, were convicted of a DUI or had committed any violent or sexual offense, like Eric noted.
Yeah, and we were talking about this off mic, but the distinction between, the people who might be in the country legally originally because they had a visa or something like that, and then they overstay their visa, for example, that's a civil offense, whereas, as you just mentioned, crossing the border illegally, a criminal offense, correct?
Yeah, so it gets a bit murky when you get down to the fine details.
Yeah. I guess kind of summing up the numbers when it comes to the criminal convictions, basically around 15%, you guys said, of these people that have been arrested in Nevada by ICE, no criminal connection or no connection to the criminal justice system whatsoever, aside from coming into the country illegally, maybe.
Yeah, and something that was interesting that we found is because this data is available on the national level, we're able to compare that figure with other states. So we're able to look at how the rate of people arrested with no criminal record in Nevada compares with other states. And what we found is there appears to be a significant distinction between what we think of as blue states versus red states or purple states like Nevada. And there was a much higher share of people convicted with no criminal record or people arrested with no criminal record in states that President Trump did not win in the 2024 election. And I think we've all seen that the Trump administration has kind of prioritized going after Democrat-run cities like Los Angeles, like New York. But this data did underscore the kind of disparities in where people with no criminal record are getting arrested by ICE.
Walk me through where exactly this data comes from and the fact that it doesn't come from Immigrations and Custom Enforcement itself, the agency, because it's a little murky to try and get the exact hard numbers from ICE. How come?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've all seen that ICE is at times very proud and willing to show its immigration enforcement data, but because this data is so granular and talks about every arrest, every possible detention, it's not something that ICE is releasing publicly. So this data originates from what's called the Deportation Data Project, and that actually dates back to the Biden administration, where researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, have been filing Freedom of Information Act requests. It's a research project, so it's available to the entire public. Anyone can go online and look at this granular data and do their own analyses from it.
Yeah, I think it's important to note ICE does release some data publicly on a monthly basis, but it's just not as granular as this. So they do document deportations and how many people are held in certain facilities, but it's just not at this level.
Gotcha. So it's coming from the Deportation Data Project, but ultimately the data originally through these FOIA requests, as they're called, is the hard numbers from ICE, just obtained through a different means, essentially. Yeah. How did you possibly go through? I mean, because we're talking, you're probably downloading an Excel spreadsheet with hundreds of thousands of lines in it. I mean, how do you even begin to? This is probably a little too wonky for most of our listeners, but as a aspiring data journalist myself, how'd you do that?
Yeah, so it's tens of thousands of entries, and there's different data sets for arrests, for detainers, for people moving through the immigration system. And it's just, this is, like you said, probably a little in the weeds, but I use the coding platform R, and you're able to filter this data by the state of apprehension, the date of apprehension, whether these people have faced criminal charges, and kind of find everything that you want to know from there.
Gotcha. Any other kind of big takeaways that we haven't mentioned yet in terms of, I mean, you guys, again, did the deep dive into all of these figures. Anything, Eric or Bella, that we haven't mentioned just yet?
I think I think it's important to just emphasize the overarching themes of what we're seeing. The data does not necessarily reflect if you were only looking at ICE's social media platform, it doesn't necessarily reflect exactly what is being shown there. There are people who do not have criminal histories who are being arrested by ICE. And I think it's because the ICE data is a lot more inconsistent and has more holes in regards to deportation data, we're not able to see exactly how many of these people have been deported outside of the United States.
Right.
But it became clear in looking at these findings that the public pronouncements by ICE is not reflected entirely in the data.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something important to note is just that Nevada is one of the states with the highest share of undocumented people, so these arrests really are impacting our community. We've seen local businesses temporarily shutter, and a lot of people are scared. So beyond the data, this is having real life ramifications.
And there's also the political context of all of this. We obviously have a Republican governor, and Bella has done some great reporting on just what the Lombardo administration is doing in regards to immigration enforcement, because he has had to toe the line a lot of times.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of, this is a state that Trump won for a Republican for the first time in 20 years. So there's a lot of political kind of things looming over this data.
Yeah, and Nevada was labeled a sanctuary state by the Trump administration, and that's a designation that they have tried to fix from the Lombardo administration's perspective. And I don't know exactly the latest on that. You guys have done more reporting on that than I, but yeah, that's kind of the background of the context of all this. One last thing I wanted to point out too, because we've been talking about arrests here and just want to make sure we have the distinction clear. We don't know exactly what percentage of these people that are arrested by ICE ultimately are deported. That's a different thing entirely, and explain why we can't exactly parse that out.
Yeah, so the Deportation Data Project does have data sets related to removals, which is what we would think of as deportations. But the researchers have noticed significant holes or lapses in that data and have recommended to anyone kind of parsing through that data or presenting those findings to the public to kind of not necessarily steer clear, but be wary of making any sweeping conclusions based on that data. So that's why our analysis focuses mostly on arrests, because that is the data that the researchers and we feel most comfortable providing to the public.
All right, Eric and Bella from the Nevada Independent, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast this week. We really appreciate it. As we heard earlier in the episode, we had that kind of anecdote of the ride-along. And in that instance, as we talked about, those were all people with a criminal conviction. And this is why I wanted to bring you guys on to show me, because you guys dug through the numbers to find that is not reflective maybe of the entire picture here, where it's really a minority that have a violent criminal conviction. And so it's hard work going through massive data sets and pulling out the numbers. I will put the link in the show notes. There's also some great graphics that you guys made that really show with bright, pretty colors and the drastic increase that we've been talking about. So that will be in the show notes as well. Keep up the good work. Thank you guys for your reporting and for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Once again, a special thank you to Kim, Eric, and Bella for coming on the pod this week, and to my associate producer, Brian Petrus, who's been instrumental in helping me research topics, find possible guests, and the occasional editing help. And don't forget to listen 2 weeks from now when we bring you part 2 right here on this feed. Also, before we go today, thank you, our listeners, for voting Ballot Battleground Nevada the third best local podcast in Northern Nevada. That was in the Reno News and Review's annual Best of Awards. I'm glad to hear that more people are discovering our show and hopefully liking it too, and I have you all to thank for helping make that happen. You can continue to spread the good word of Ballot Battleground Nevada by leaving a rating and a review and telling someone new about the show. Thanks for listening.